Our first poet is Joseph Mills. Joseph is a faculty member at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts and holds an endowed chair there and has been honored with the UNC Board of Governors Award for Excellence in Teaching. Joseph Mills has published 8 volumes of poetry, most recently Bodies in Motion, Poems About Dance, and Joseph is going to be reading from that publication. In addition, Joseph has edited a collection of film criticism called A Century of the Marx Brothers, and I just implored him to let me mention that. He wanted me to edit all sorts of things out here, but I had to just keep that one in there. And then also his book, The Miraculous Turning, was awarded the North Carolina Roanoke Chowan Award for Poetry for its exploration of race and family. So Joseph will be first. Second is Janis Harrington. Janis's second poetry collection, How to Cut a Woman in Half, was a finalist for the Able Muse Book Award, and Janis is going to be reading from How to Cut a Woman in Half today. Her first collection, Waiting for the Hurricane, was awarded the Lena Shull Book Award by the North Carolina Poetry Society. And Janis is a 3-time finalist for the James Applewhite Poetry Prize competition. Janis is also the co-host of a companion independent bookstore, Flyleaf Books, second Sunday poetry reading series in Chapel Hill. And Janis's work has appeared in Tar River Poetry, Journal of the American Medical Association, and the North Carolina Literary Review. Let me back up for just a second to say at the very end also of all these introductions, I'll tell you where you can go online to find out more about all of these poets. Third of our poets today, Tony Reevy, who is a graduate of NC State, UNC Chapel Hill, and Miami University. Tony has published prose and poetry, including nonfiction books. These are the titles: Ghost Train, exclamation point in there, O. Winston Link, The Life Along the Line, The Railroad Photography of Jack Delano, The Railroad Photography of Lucius Beebe. I did it. I hope you're proud of me, Tony. I was paying attention and taking notes. And of course, this is the entire title, The Railroad Photography of Lucius Beebe and Charles Clegg. And then he has several full-length poetry collections, Old North, Passage and Socorro, and Turbulence, which was published in 2022. Tony is reading from Turbulence today, and he lives in Durham. So we're glad to have you as well from Durham. And then our final poet this afternoon is Crystal Simone Smith, who is a poet, an indie publisher, and educator. She is the author of Dark Testament, published this year, and Crystal is going to be reading from Dark Testament today, and has also published 3 poetry chapbooks. She is also a co-author along with the editor, Leonard D. Moore, of One Window's Light, a collection of haiku, and it won the Haiku Society of America's Merit Book Award for Best Haiku Anthology. Crystal's latest collection of haiku, Ebbing Shore, won the Haiku Foundation Touchstone Distinguished Book Award last year. And Crystal's work has appeared in numerous journals, including Poetry Magazine, Crab Orchard Review, Frog Pond, and Modern Haiku. In 2020, she received Duke University's Humanities Unbounded Fellowship. Crystal writes poetry about the human condition and social change. So let me give you these websites. So virtual audience, if you want to know more about these poets, or in-person audience, you know how to do some searches. You can do this too. Let me do this in reverse order. Why not? I'll just be bold and daring here. To find out more about Crystal Smith, go to crystalsimonesmith.com. For Tony Reevy, tonyreevy.net. For Janis Harrington, janisharrington.com. And the last that is now about to be first, josephrobertmills.com. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. Joseph, please get us started. Thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you for coming, everyone. I'm going to read half a dozen poems from a book called Bodies in Motion, which are poems about dance. I am not a dancer. Somebody once said, oh, I thought you were a dancer, and then you stood up. But I love dance. I teach a lot of films and literature about dance. And one of my beliefs is that almost every movie has a dance moment in it. And most works of literature do as well, even things you don't expect. So like we were watching several years ago, The Two Popes on Netflix, where one of the popes retires and the other pope takes over. There should be no dancing in this film. Right at the end, the one pope says to the other, I'll show you how to tango. I started like screaming at the television to my wife. I was like, there it is again. So I was once asked to just read one poem that would summarize the whole book. And this is the poem that I picked. It's called A Brief History of Time, which is Errol Morris's documentary on Stephen Hawking. The physicist explains black holes by comparing them to dancers, a partner in white and one in black on a darkened ballroom floor. You can't see the one, he says, but you know they're there because of the way the other moves. And I wonder if there is anything that can't be explained by dance, any part of the universe or the human heart, so much that seems invisible. An absent parent, a dead child, can be discerned by those carefully tracking our orbits. So last Friday is the first Friday of June, which is an important national holiday. It is National Donut Day. This is very important in my family, and we end up going as many places as we can. But there's a holiday before that, which is National Tap Day, which is May 25th. And that is the birthday of Bill Robinson, who is one of the great American dancers. This is called The Rise and Fall of Bill Robinson, who is also known as Bojangles. 60,000 people passed his casket when he died in 1949. Thousands more line the streets, but now most know him only from Shirley Temple movies and clips. The old, white-headed, seeming Uncle Tom. This is the problem of recordings. What remains becomes what was. What is lost are the live performances, his prime and his star turns on Broadway. What is lost is his role as the drum major, leading the Harlem Hellfighters down Fifth Avenue after World War I. What is lost is the gold-plated revolver he put on the table at the restaurant and the insistence, you will serve me now. A few phrases like copacetic remain. But even the nickname itself, Bojangles, now mainly evokes a fast food restaurant because its white founders liked the song by a white band written by a white singer who met a white hobo in jail who was using it to hide his identity. Bojangles did his famous stare dance with a young girl, and what was lost was a sense of what it meant, ascending and descending and ascending again, all the while tapping out rhythms at his own pace, according to his own steps, the stairs of physical fact and a metaphor that went beyond metaphor, the heel and toe, the foot striking the treads and risers, making music, the body, the instrument, the body, the music, the body, the person, insisting, here I am. I am a man whose step makes the world thrum. So I teach a lot of film and a lot of dance film, including Astaire and Rogers, which are just, I think, some of the wonderful bits of movie magic that have ever been made. And this is my favorite scene in all of Astaire and Rogers. The song is, Isn't This a Lovely Day to Be Caught in the Rain? And it's from Top Hat. Isn't this a lovely day? Ginger, out riding, gets caught in a storm and shelters in a gazebo. Fred arrives with an umbrella and asks, may I rescue you? When she refuses that role, he joins her and they begin to dance. They do so as equals, both wearing pants and jackets, repeating each other's steps. After he throws her, she throws him. At the end, there is no dip or kiss. Instead, they sit side by side and shake hands. The gowns, the top hats, the supposed elegance are elsewhere. In this scene, they move playfully, discovering how smart and fun the other can be. It is a moment of joy in a storm, or as the poet says, a temporary stay against confusion. under dark clouds, in a skeletal shelter. We can take each other's hands and create moments of beauty and equality, dancing in a way that reveals who we are and who we can be together. I wrote many of these during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we were doing Friday night dance parties for the first 3 months in my house because my daughter was a senior and she lost prom, she lost all these things. So we started going out there every Friday night, and every Friday night it would build and build and build. And then we started dressing up and we were doing themes and we were doing a playlist, and she taught me how to make TikToks. I don't even know what I was doing. She's like, no, it'll be fun, do this then. So I was like, okay. And I thought I was gonna write about those because of all that dancing. And I didn't, I tried, but none of those are in the book. But what is in the book is a much older experience with them that came out. This is the oldest poem in the book, and they're now 20, 17. They're very young in this poem. And the title will tell you exactly when it was done. It's called After the Pulse Massacre. When trainers dance like your daddy shuffles up, the 9-year-old pulls his mother into the kitchen where I've been cooking dinner and talking to his teenage sister about the news from Florida. He expects the family to dance. That's what we do when the song comes on. The daughter gives me a look, the one she has when someone says something racist, the one that asks, how are you gonna handle this? In response, I turn up the volume. The beat pulses through the house and everyone begins to strut. My children are athletic and graceful and beautiful. In a photo I keep on my desk, they are leaping joyously outside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I realized one day their bodies are in positions similar to a panel in the graphic novel Persepolis, where an explosion blows up several children at a party. Now the picture makes me both happy and uneasy. Just as tonight, watching them do dance moves we taught them from our club lives years ago makes me afraid. We cannot keep them safe, and we cannot know what is coming. So I answer the question, how can we dance now? With now is what we have. As glib or trite or even obtuse as that may seem, there is hatred and violence and death around us, and we should dance with one another when we can. This is neither denial nor avoidance, and it's not the only response. It is one in one moment, one now. Later, we gather on the couch for a basketball game, which is as close as the family gets to a religious ritual. There is a moment of silence beforehand for Orlando. And the son wants to know what that means. We explain as best we can the shooting. They were just dancing, he asks, like us. We say, yeah, just dancing, like us. He doesn't say anything more, and we don't either. We don't coax a conversation or offer reassurances. We sit silent, feeling the weight of what happened and can happen, feeling the presence of one another. And then we watch the athletes, allowing ourselves to be soothed by beautiful bodies moving in space. So I'll read just two more. This is a poem about dancing with my wife, which is some of the hardest times in our lives because she wants me to be furthest there, and I am not. And sometimes she'll just stop and say, what are you doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And I realized one of the real problems of it is this whole idea of leading. We've been together for a long time. The lead shifts. So this is called When the Dance Instructor Says, Follow Your Partner's Lead. Ignore the imperative, the possessive your, the complicated questions of trust, and simply ask how you can both follow your partner's lead. Wouldn't that be an Escher painting, a Mobius strip? I'm following you, following me, following you, following, and perhaps that's the point. Relationships ebb and flow. We change places and leads over the day and the days and the years. Of what good is it to assign positions to the wave and the water? Which hand is responsible for what happens when hand meets hand? And, oh, so that's the poem you like you didn't like the other four. I'll just end this one. This is the last poem of the book called Gratitude. You know, one of the nice things about the pandemic was it made me realize how special this is, like getting together in a group. I don't take this for granted anymore at all. So thank you all for coming, because this is always special. So this is called gratitude. After a dance, thank your partner, no matter how good either of you are. Thank them to acknowledge how unnecessary it is, such dancing, and so how much more of a gift. Thank them for giving you a part of their life. Thank them for allowing you to give a part of yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's fine. Okay, great. Am I audible? That was wonderful, Joe. Thank you. And thank you to Malaprops and to Patricia and Stephanie for helping today. I'm going to read from my new book, How to Cut a Woman in Half. And the book is a story about two sisters' devotion and loyalty to one another. In the main story, the narrator supports her younger sister Annie in the weeks following after Annie's husband, Nick, takes his life. And in watching her sister grieve, the narrator gets in touch with her own unresolved grief about the death of her husband, her young husband, many years before. It is a book about grief and loss, but I think equally about resilience and healing. So I'll start with a poem that's a flashback to when the narrator and her sister Annie were in their 20s. Outer Banks Harbinger. Ranger's hut boarded up, our choice of campsites. Car radio broken. Far too dark to notice the dunes, sea oats blown flat, a red pennant. Newlywed Pete and I, Annie and her longtime boyfriend Nick, each of us ignorant. We struggle to pitch a mildewed family tent as the ocean roars and the wind gains force. All night we huddle within canvas walls, snapping like loosed sails, our youthful bodies the only ballast. At dawn, storm spent, we unzip the flaps, astonished to be alive. Sure, God's grace has secured our futures. Soon Annie and Nick will graduate, marry at last. My own husband will take a curve too fast. The next poem jumps ahead in time to when the narrator is middle-aged and living in Switzerland and gets a call saying that her sister's husband, Nick, has taken his life. On the first flight out, easy to disbelieve at 30,000 feet, oxygen thin, awake before dawn, surreal to see the Alps' icy peaks below me, not above. Crossing the North Pole to LAX, 11 hours incommunicado, I concoct a shock antidote. The call was a hoax. Unreal 2, palm trees, brazen sun, driving the I-5 south to San Diego. I ring and ring, but no response on my sister's end. Parked curbside, seeing her house serene, I feel the waking sleeper's relief, only a dream. But at her door, a florist vase, lilies and mums, a card with a black band, Annie's name scrawled by a stranger's hand. As you probably know, bardo is a Buddhist term for the transitional time between leaving this life and incarnating into your next, your rebirth. Bardo, Nick may come and go for 49 nights. Annie's Buddhist acupuncturist advises, keep his things, play his music, leave the lights on. Daily they confer, Tsarina and Rasputin. Weary, I eavesdrop, want to warn, charlatan. It can't be healthy. Constant Tchaikovsky, or the staged pretense of Nick's non-absence. Brass lamps glow beside his chair, a glass of Chilean red, book open to last page read. Available for his ethereal touch, razor on sink, towel on hook, socks curled in balls. And on their bed, unaided by sleeping pills, alert for a sign or caress, his wife, denied a goodbye, left behind in this life. And so the narrator cancels her flight home and promises that she'll stay until Annie can be alone. Minefield. The African gray parrot, dead-on mimic, calls to her in Nick's voice, keeps it up until Annie drops night on the cage. The doorbell can mean more flowers, or a neighbor with a crock pot, salad, and sourdough bread. The upbeat dental hygienist phones to book Nick's 6th-month recall visit. The Blockbuster account is in his name. Coming home, each time we're tricked for an instant by Nick's car in the garage. The classical FM station asks if, again this year, they can count on him. On the patio where he smoked Cuban cigars, the pottery ashtray fills with rain. Nick's parents were Russian and suffered terribly during World War II. And the next poem takes place in the Ukraine in 1943 when Nick's father escaped a Stalag, or a German POW camp. Russian roulette. Escaped from the Stalag, he walked home. Weeks of stealthy nights, days sleeping in trees above prowling wolves, licking rain from leaves, eating foraged berries. Arrived, he hid in the woods beyond the hamlet's huddled houses, its cabbage patches and copper onion dome, steps away from his mother, who feared he was dead, within scent of her cooking smoke. He tarried there as long as he dared, then left with nowhere to go. That year he faced 2 times a firing squad, and twice he defied the odds. Just a reprieve. Patient for a generation, the bullet waited for his son. He lingers on the earth plane. The Buddhist acupuncturist chides my sister for weeping, says her grief prevents Nick from loosening his attachment, keeps him near, desperate to comfort her. Off track in the intermediate state, he's stuck. His soul can't incarnate. My ear to her bedroom door, I hear Annie muffle sobs with a pillow to liberate her beloved from the limbo of their love. I imagine Nick beyond gravity, a Chagall figure, arm extended, gazing down from the cathedral ceiling's peak, unable to touch or to leave her, he floats, weightless as an astronaut, tethered by her tears and his regret. I mentioned earlier that the narrator also lost her young husband many years earlier, and this next poem is a flashback to that time. Single car accident. The empty child seat prompts a search party. Arms length apart, rescue workers and neighbors who heard the crash step slowly, praying a toddler is not lost in these wet woods, was not ejected at impact like the driver, unconscious in the shrieking ambulance, reckless with his own life, seatbelt unclasped, driving too fast for dusk and rain, this back road slick blacktop. Surely he would have secured his son or daughter. Flashlight beams crisscross, careen from oak to redbud to pine, startling nesting birds and families of white-tailed deer. In unison, the men call out, fall silent, listen for the cries of a child who might be missing. I'll finish with one last poem, which is the title poem of the book. How to Cut a Woman in Half. Fate, a cruel magician, vanishes her husband, leaving her table with half as many plates, shower rack missing half its towels, bed half empty. The trick, after the blade falls, she shrinks herself into half of her former life. But is he truly absent? She wills each day's crawling hours to end, certain he waits in sleep's tempting garden. No hope of persuading her that dreams are merely pain's sleight of hand. Eventually, she will emerge on stage, performance complete, appearing unharmed. Does it matter what is illusion or real if, when she steps from grief's box, she feels whole? Thank you.
Step close. Step a little closer to the podium.
It's good.
Then I'm gonna bring it a little closer to you, yeah. Surprise. And I'll turn it on. Okay.
Thank you.
Now
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you to Malaprops for hosting us today. Thank you all, including my fellow poets, for being here. I'm going to read a few poems from my latest book of poetry, Turbulence. I think it's a good follow-up to the preceding book. It's an attempt to at least think a little bit about family, the resiliency, the challenges in our messy country. So I'll read a few poems from Turbulence. First one's called Keepone Days. Does anyone know what keepone is? It's something that, it's a pollutant that got into the James River many years ago. We'd throw down our bikes, just graduated from banana seats to 10 speeds, at the end of the squat row of new houses, a broad floodplain bank littered with Hurricane Agnes's leavings was our front porch to the James. Jordan's Point, the looming bridge towers just upstream. Then farther west, Hopewell and its fuming chemical factories. While we splashed, played, weekends mostly, men labored in the old filling station, which Allied Chemical said it didn't own. And the plume spread downstream towards us. Each Monday, we'd go back to junior high together, wearing our Converses if the river water soaking them had dried. So like Crystal Simone Smith, who you'll hear from in a moment, I live in Durham and have lived there most of my life. So I'm a big aficionado of the Eno State Park, and I'll read a poem that's based there. It's called Eno Hike. Summer air sweet and thick, forest damp and green, ground where it shows red, in the clearing verdant, almost overgrown sumac berries, carmine plump, show promise. The path runs down the slope. At its foot, the Eno flows, clear and even, but not too full. You could walk across the rocks now, no trouble to the trail on the other side. I turn the bend and hike along the river, slow, time to think. Suddenly thunder, deep, rolling, like a night phone call bringing bad news. The breeze stills. Thunder means lightning. In my dreams, I always die that way. I quicken my pace, lose my thoughts. Now I see the whitened tree like polished bone, a deadfall rotting 2 years and waiting to tumble. Crossing the bridge, I hear thrashing below. The commotion resolves, sunbathing copperhead, frightened by my walk, coiling to strike. It's 3 feet under and 5 to my right, faced away from the path, but it could have been along the trail, sunning unseen. I hurry to the car, refuge from lightning and snakes, parked away from deadfalls. I've never seen them on this path before. I'm going to change what I planned a little bit because my wife and son are here and we decided to go to the Koala Boundary yesterday. So I'm going to read a poem called The Chief's Grave, which is set in Robbinsville, which is not too terribly far from here as North Carolina goes. It's called The Chief's Grave. One who tries but fails, Juna Liska's last home is a rise in Robbinsville, just bought back by the tribe. We stopped to pay our respects. My boy and I walked the medicine trail. The grave was fenced, filled with flowers. Ian didn't want to leave, clung to the enclosure, threw his shoe inside, cursing too low, I hope, for him to hear, praying people in the museum couldn't see. I jumped the rail, got it back. You never know what a boy is going to do, where a boy is going to take you. So during one of the family crises in this book, my son and I visited a place near South Boston, Virginia called Diamond Hill Cemetery. And my children, when they were younger, were interested in collecting rocks. And a friend of mine there had told me that this was a place where you could find interesting rocks. But when we visited it, we realized this had a very different history than that. This is called at Diamond Hill Cemetery. Violets along the trail, first green of spring, purple smallish blooms, new heart leaves, stones under last year's mold mound the site. A sign admonishes, respect the fallen. 2 trees grown together, rub with the wind. At the end of the path, cradled in crotch of tree roots, flat rocks marked with messages, some about old times, bondage, lost years, others contemporary, dead at 5, OD, and at the bottom left of the pile, cancer. A breeze sweeps past, the joined cedar, white oak, creek cry together. And of course, what my friend hadn't told us was this was a slave cemetery at the plantation near South Boston. I'll read another poem about that place. I got really obsessed with this place. I'm not really sure why, but and also that you'll see my after an election in 2016, my style got very different. I got a little bit more sort of I don't know, sporadic, nervous. I don't know what to call it, but this is Hallowed Ground, and again, it's also about Diamond Hill Cemetery. The sign says, "Be respectful." Chiggers in the grass, short pants, should have remembered. Trees still creak, grown together. Next time, bring a stone, talisman, cairn like the turf-ridden rocks surrounding me. Bench, sit, ask for guidance. Hearing none, need to go. Hurry back onto the path. A woman walking asks, "Where did you come from?" I'll read a couple more. One is called Child Sitting, and that's about sort of the central issue of this book, child sitting. And it's a non-traditional sonnet. I know there's some sonnets today. Her hand is warm, the respirator's gas brass click louder than the snap of the quartz clock. Outside, a fresh spring forces buds to open under a blank window. The machine's sighs tell the time here, less than a day until they turn it off. And I'll end with another sonnet and then the last poem in Turbulence. So this moves forward in time a bit. This is called River Year. The river flows with a slow sluicing sound, meeting its well-worn mud path to the sea. Meeting Durham's Heart of Rock ledge, it swerves, cuts a new way through less difficult ground. In summer here, the still air smells of mold. In fall come softer leaf steps on the trail. In winter, there are brown tree skeletons. Then the woodland turns again to sudden green. The years flow on to a twice empty end. Sister, brother go under the scalpel. Still the Eno flows, summer sewage tinged, make this meander down to the ocean. A river otter, the first here in years, waits on the bank, whiskers twitching for fish. And I'll close with the closing poem, which is called Northern Lights, Southern Town. And this is set in Durham and really happened right down the side street in our neighborhood. So Northern Lights, Southern Town. Under the glimmering arch of green ghosted sky, this shouldn't happen here, I told my daughter and son. We stood stilled, watching as ions winked, swirled, emerald and red. We dreamed of Alaska, Canada, and Mars. Soon, too soon, Aurora Borealis was gone, leaving sky jaundiced by city lights, their glow diminishing the stars. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. Wonderful readings. Much like Joseph's collection of poetry, Dark Testament is a pandemic book, and it was written as I took a Duke Fellowship to write. It's a writer's dream to have free time to write, and I had a whole year of course release to write. And what happened subsequently was a pandemic, a shutdown. Ahmaud Arbery was killed. George Floyd was murdered, his recorded murder. And the Black Lives Matter movement swelled to unprecedented numbers and marched out into the streets. So this book is very important because it's a book that would have not happened had it not been for all of those scenarios. And as a mother of Black sons, it was a very dark time for me because you sort of realize no matter how many changes happen in this country, in the history of this country, that racial violence is always a constant that continues no matter what changes. So this book is a result of all of that. And I wrote these poems from George Saunders' Lincoln and the Bardo. Blackout poems are poems that you use an existing text, and you take that text and you black out certain passages and words, and you create a new poem. And at the time I was reading Lincoln and the Bardo, I think Janis mentioned what the Bardo is. It's a state, as she said, but George Saunders wrote this book many years ago, and it's about Lincoln's son's death, Willie Lincoln, while he was in the White House. And I was reading this book, and there was so much grief and all of that I was probably distracted, and I started blacking out certain parts of the text. And what emerged was a collection of blackout poems. So I'm going to read a few of them. This book, I was lucky enough to have an agent at the time. I still have this agent. And I sent her the poems, and she really loved love the collection, and it's sold at auction to Macmillan Henry Holt. So it's in a lot of places, in a lot of stores, and I'm really proud of that. I'm going to read the poems. I'm not going to preference as I go through them, because I think the voices in the poems speak for themselves. No justice, no peace. If such things as goodness and brotherhood and redemption exist and may be attained, these must require the vanishing of the heartless oppressor. We are dead, I said. No more, I said. Oscar Grant. Please understand, we had been fathers, had been men, sorrowful, surging forward, damaged, had been young, our gentle qualities stripped from us by circumstance. Men who had come to grasp our heavy burden. If we could not be great, we would be useful, affecting good, smiling, hands in pocket, watching the world, cheering on days, tolerant of dark secrets. What I mean to say is we had been loved, not lonely, not lost, not freakish. Loved, I say, loved. Black mothers and sons. I am waiting to be discovered, head upended. The awful mess, mother will not be pleased, having come so close to losing everything. Devoutly loving, standing very still among the beautiful things of this world, dream kicking, rearranged, passing ship-like, while in town a purple blue day unfolds. Each moist grass, flower-pierced yard, gone positively mad. Hashtag BLM. We must, we felt, do all we could in light of the many dead across the land. As we trod that difficult path, now well upon more boys, each of whom was once dear to someone, we must endeavor. Our grief must put us even deeper in. Sorry, page turning. There we go. Okay. White witnesses. As always at sun's rising, all was ours, all the stones, trees, shrubs, hills, valleys, streams, pondlets, marshes, patches of light and shade. Much that was new and strange and unnerving had occurred this night. We watched it all unfold from on high, safe, separate, free, the way we liked it. Black witness. From my left came a shout of terror, always bone-chilling, fire sound. Who had gone? I could not tell, and I was still too under siege myself to care. Just going to read a couple more here. Rodney King. He was an open book, opened up somewhat wider by sorrow, by all of us, black and white. It had made him sad. All of us, white and black, had made him sadder with our sadness. I thought then, as hard as I could, of all I had heard regarding troubles and degradations. and called to mind others I had known and loved, and all the things they had endured. We are ready, are angry, are capable, are coiled up so tight as to be deadly or holy. Turn us loose, let us at it, let us show you what we can do. Read the last poem that was the first poem that I blacked out in this series. It started out as just a board writing prompt exercise and swelled into this whole collection. This poem was written during the initial days of the protest after George Floyd was killed. The dilemma we all live with. I called. We were in a desperate situation. How exactly would we say it? We weren't exactly kings of words. The architect of this place has, for reasons we cannot know, deemed that to love one's life enough to desire to stay here a terrible sin, worthy of the most severe punishment. Tell them we are tired of being nothing and doing nothing and mattering not at all to anyone and living in a state of constant fear. Not sure we can remember all of that, said Mr. Sounds like quite a commitment, said Mr. Thank you.